Hello, everybody. Today's LinkedIn Live and Know Your Worth AMA is all about the client journey from when they know nothing whatsoever about you to all the way when they love you and they're going to be your biggest fans and give you all the recommendations and testimonials you need. So, hi, everyone. I'm Julia Poger. I'm a business, conference, and diplomatic interpreter. I work from Russian and French into English and English into Russian. And as you probably know since you're here, I also run a business called Know Your Worth that can help interpreters and really any service providers get your name out and sell your services so that you can have your conditions and your fees. And as promised, today I want to talk about the client journey. And before we do that, I'd like to just get a couple of terms straight with you so that we all know what we're talking about. And the two main terms I wanted to talk about are the customer versus the client. Now, anybody who's taken my Know Your Worth classes before knows that there's a big difference between the two of them, at least the way that I talk about them. And the customer in Julia land and Know Your Worth land is the person who uses your service, the person who is actually listening to you if you're an interpreter, or reading your translations, or if you are a coach or whatever. They're the person who is actually taking your advice and implementing it. In this particular case, I'm not talking about that customer at all. We all know how to serve our customers. We learned it in school. We learned it in the world. We know what our customers want and what they don't want. So I'm not going to talk about that at all. What I'd like to talk about is your client. Now, your client is the person who chooses to pay you. They're the one who looked for somebody, for a service provider like you, and who would like very much to pay you to offer your services to either them or to some other customer. Now, your client could also be your customer at some point. But just so you understand, the client, whenever I talk about them, is the person who chooses to pay you. Now, your client, as you probably already know, could be an agency who is like an intermediary and finds you work. Your client could be a direct client. You could be working for, I don't know, Hewlett Packard or Prada, anyway, or whoever. And then a third client that many of us forget about are our colleagues, because our colleagues don't have all of the services that need to be offered. Maybe we need to work together in a team, whatever. But your client, whenever I talk about the client and the person who chooses to pay you, it could be any of those three people in that category, okay? Now that I've got that over the way, I'd love it if you would just let me know who you are and where you're watching this from, if that helps. And if you have any questions or anything about the client journey as I go along, just put it in the comments and I will try and answer them for you. Okay, we've now talked about the terms customer versus client. So what exactly is a client journey? So the client journey is basically something that is somebody going from no knowledge whatsoever of whatever it is you do and however you work it, and doesn't even know that they need your services, all the way up through becoming aware of you, learning about you, figuring out that you're the person that they will know, like, and trust with their money, and signing up to using your services, having a wonderful time using your services, and then in the future using your services again. So that's the full client journey, and that's what I really want to talk to you about today. Okay. So I'm going to go through this fairly quickly, and if you are ever, confused, or if you have any questions at all, just let me know. Though having done this particular thing several times, I think I might have it down, so it might work out okay. So the first thing that I wanted to let you know is that clients buy when they are ready, not when you are ready. So as interpreters, we tend to have a schedule. You know the schedule, right? Um, in January, nobody ever calls us. In December, as of say the 15th, nobody calls us all the way through January, maybe into mid-February. And August, depending on the country that you're in, especially if you're in France, is zero work at all. So you are never going to get any work to help yourself then. And so you could be ready to work in August and they're not. So you need to keep this truth in mind, because without keeping that truth in mind, you're going to be frustrated and upset that nobody calls you when you've got all this time available, but 3 people call you for the same day in, say, June, which happens all the time to all of us. We all want to clone ourselves and turn ourselves into like 3 or 4 different people, because there's at least, 3 or 4 or maybe even 10 days in the year when we could be working like 10 different conferences on that day because we've been called for them. But unfortunately, that's not how the world works. And so they buy when they are ready and not when you are ready. So do be careful about that, and keep it in mind, because it will save you a lot of frustration. So I'm just going to double check. I'm going to share my screen, which I have never done on this particular thing before. So I practiced. I'm hoping it's going to work. And I love the fact that no matter how often you practice and no matter how often you do this, you still have to talk your way through sharing the screen. So this is me sharing my screen, and this is what I wanted to show you about. This is the funnel. Now, I'm sure you've all heard about the funnel out there, and people talk about it in many different ways. Very often it's used for product sales. So you get people outside the funnel and they kind of come into the funnel somehow through a lead magnet. Like if I were to sell a book of my blog posts, for example, I could offer that in exchange for your email address. I would use your email address on a list because you would have agreed, and I would send you out a newsletter once a week, about some topic or other, or something that's coming up or something that's important to you. Your awareness has already happened through the lead magnet. Your interest is continued through all of these newsletters that I've been writing. The decision is made when the decision is made, when they are ready, when the client is ready, and then they take action and they buy your product, service, whatever. That kind of funnel doesn't work so well for us, for interpreters, mainly because we are not in control of how our clients hire us and when, and the clients are not in control of when they want to be aware of us or not. So getting a newsletter from some random interpreter who sent some lead magnet that might be of worth to you once, they're going to desubscribe or unsubscribe from that newsletter fairly quickly. They're going to think, maybe when they finally do need you a year and a half later, who was that person? What was going on? And funnels don't work for us that way for buying. However, they do work well for us for things like getting people to know who you are. So the funnel, in the sense that I would like to talk about it, is the one that's on the screen, which is starting out with awareness. I'm assuming you can see my little arrow. I hope you can see the arrow. Anyway, the cursor. So we start off with awareness, which is they have no idea that interpreters exist, or they have no idea that this type of consultant exists, or whoever you may be exists. Okay, so first we have to make them aware of the fact that what we do actually exists, and that it exists in a certain way, and that we help certain types of people or companies or whatever. And so their awareness is peaked. And so there's that kind of way of talking to people that lets them become aware of the fact that there are interpreters out there. Okay, so this is what interpreters do. This is how we work. Do they really care about the technicalities of how we work? I don't think so. But they could they could be interested in this is what an interpreter does, and this is the value in general that they could bring to you. Okay. Then there's a level of interest. After awareness, there's interest. So the interest is much more of, okay, they've become aware that you bring some kind of value to them and this is kind of what you do. I'm a little interested in this kind of idea. I wonder if this could bring something to me in the future at some point. But see, they're already past the baby level of awareness, the ABCs. They might be up to the DEFs. Okay. So the just the next step of being a little bit more interested in what it is we do, the places that we work, what it might mean for them. Okay. Their decision would be made when they have some kind of an external trigger. Okay. I never really needed an interpreter before, but suddenly I need one, and oh my God, how do I find one? And okay, there's this person that I've been following who's been great about explaining to me what interpreting is, and has piqued my interest. So maybe there's a decision I could make by talking to them, and then they take action and they contact you. The other thing that you have to understand about this funnel shape is how many of you think, I call a I call somebody who could potentially be a client, so a prospect, right? A prospective client. I call a prospect and they become a client. Woohoo! So it's a 1-to-1 ratio. I mean, how many of you actually think that? Because personally, I know that when I first started out, I was like, okay, I need to contact this person and then they'll hire me. Woohoo! And then I realized that they wouldn't. And agencies are constantly putting your CV or your letter on file, and we'll get in touch with you when we need you. And 5 years later, you might get a one-day conference out of it. Woohoo! And yes, this has happened to me several times. In actual fact, at the top level stage, you have to, at the bottom level stage, to get one client who takes action, who actually signs the contract with you, you probably need to talk to 100 people, 100 people, who are at the decision level, which means, 1 out of 10. No, 1 out of 100. So my math is terrible. If you've ever worked with me in the past, you know that my math is terrible. I work with spreadsheets to do all my math. But anyway, so to get one person, you have to have talked to 100 people already who are at the decision level. That's 1 to 100. Okay, in some cases, conversion might be 1 to 20, it might be 1 to 50, it might be 1 to 60. I don't know what yours might be. And in other fields of interest, client acquisition tends to be maybe 1 out of, maybe 30 from decision people. All right, but to make it easier for me and my terrible math, we're going to say it's 1 out of 100. So to get people at the decision level, you need, if we times that, maybe 1 out of 1,000. That's even better because it's only 1 out of 10 people, to get to the decision, but you know what I mean. So 1 out of 1,000, and to get, awareness, maybe you need to have 1 out of 10,000, which means you need to have had your net spread way wide. And I realize that these percentages are not real at all, but I'm just trying to explain to you that your net has to be cast way wide to get down to that one person who's ever going to call you. And that is a valid funnel image for you to understand. Okay, so that's the funnel image that I want you to really understand and figure out. Okay, so no questions so far. I'm just asking, and I know that this goes out about 15 seconds before you guys see it, so there wouldn't be any questions for 15 seconds anyway. A quick presentation tip is that if you ever are presenting to people, there are introverts and there are extroverts. And the introverts take about 15 seconds to start asking their questions, but that's fine too. Okay, so that was the funnel. I'm just going to keep moving on, and if any questions come up, I can always go back to them. Now, the next thing, actually, I'm going to hide that one for a second, is because I need to show you what the next thing actually is. And this is something that actually looks a lot more like what our client's journey is like. This is a copywritten image by McKinsey. It's the consumer decision journey. It's considered to be rather old-fashioned, and everybody moved to the funnel, 10 years ago. You'll only ever hear about funnels now, but this is the model that really, really makes it for me and helps me understand where the the client is coming from. So the awareness level of that funnel would be, and I hope you can see my cursor, it's pointing to the big blue circle on the left, um, and where it says initial consideration set. But here, your awareness would happen way out here. It would happen somewhere there. So if people aren't aware of you at all, then this is where they kind of need to be made aware of you a little bit. So here we go. This is the starting point. There's a trigger. You see the orange star here? This is a trigger. Suddenly the person has to set up an international conference or a meeting with a client who doesn't speak the same language. So this is the starting point, and this is the initial consideration set. Oh my God, where am I going to find somebody, something, some service, anything in the world that will help me talk to this client who doesn't speak my language? Okay. Way back pre-Google, yes, some of us were alive pre-Google. My business card was out with every single economic advisor at the Russian embassy in Washington, D.C., because I lived in D.C. And I would meet these guys on with various delegations and on various work matters, and they would get my card. And so intrepid Americans who had no idea where to find a Russian interpreter, and there were no Google back then. There was a bit of an internet, but no Google. They would call the Russian embassy and say, "Do you have an interpreter that you could let us use?" And the Russian embassy, everybody they talked to had my card. So I got a bunch of work that way. So this is the initial consideration set. I mean, I don't know who does this kind of work. I need to be made aware of who does this kind of work. Maybe I'll talk to my friend who had to organize something like this before and ask them who they dealt with. Okay? And they might find out that what they need is a translator or an oral interpreter or oral translator or an interpreter or a conference organizer or a consultant interpreter, whatever. They might find out about this. And then of this initial consideration set that you see here, they're going to spend all this time up to evaluate, all this time thinking and Googling and looking online and talking to people and so on. And this is when they are going to be spending 50% of their time before they sign the contract exploring, just trying to figure out what they need, who they need, what kind of thing they need, and so on. So that's over 50% of their time without talking to anybody, without talking to you or you or you or me. They're already going to be looking around, okay? And so because they're spending all this time exploring without talking to us, we need an online presence. We need some kind of a presence for people to be able to find us. That can be social media, or it can be a website. And I'm not going to go into social media for interpreters at the moment. I have a whole class on that, and I can do a live on that at some point. But you need to have a social media presence, or at least you need to be online somewhere. Because if somebody types in your name into Google and you don't come up anywhere, they're going to be suspicious that you can do what you say you can do, okay? Actually, they're not even going to be suspicious because they're not going to find you and you're never going to get the job, okay? I hope that I have convinced you now that you need to be online somewhere. Website, social media, you probably need both, but definitely social media. Anyway, so then they get to the evaluation stage. That's all the way up here, okay? So that's the evaluation stage. At that point, they've made a choice. They figured out that there's 2 or 3 people or 2 or 3 agencies or 2 or 3 whatever service providers that can help them in their goal. So they contact these 2 or 3 people or 5 or 6 or whatever their short list is, and they talk to those people on their short list that they have made up according to their own criteria, okay? Not your criteria. So what would you think your criteria would need to be for them to contact you? What do you think their criteria might be? There could be a world of difference. And I go into that during my seminars as well. So I'm not going to go into that in great detail now, but they have chosen some criteria. And so they contact the 3 people that they've chosen, me, you, and you. Okay. And they contact these 3 people and they decide how much they know about them already from their social media and or their website. They decide how much they like them from how their personality or whatever. Maybe all they're looking at is price because they haven't been made aware that price is not actually the best criterion for hiring one of us. Who knows? They might be looking at something completely different that we have absolutely no idea about. Okay, we need to know what that is. So once we figure that out, we're probably going to get the contract. And so they go through this whole evaluation phase here by talking to you, and me. And they decide to hire a 4th person that they didn't even talk to during this phase because, oh, hey, they trust them more. Who knows? And so here is where we get the contract. This is where the contract is signed. Can you tell that the contract is not your end goal? Your contract is not your end goal. The contract is a nice thing to have. It means that this person has agreed that they're going to work with you and they're going to pay you for your services, but it is not your end goal. And you may be a little confused, but I'm just going to explain that to you now. So the contract is not your end goal because if you notice on this journey here, it's a big old circle, and that contract only comes halfway through that circle. After the contract, you get the post-purchase experience. The post-purchase experience. Okay? So that post-purchase experience is how you handle the work. So let's say that your interpreting actually happens somewhere around the T here in post. Okay, that's where your interpreting happens. All this area, this is how you talk to them, how you reassure them, how you ask for documents. Do you say, give me the documents, I can't work without them, right? Do you say something like, or do you say something much calmer, much more pleasant for the client? Well, if you'd like to, pass your documents on to me, then I'll be able to get your message across much better, for example. That won't always work, but at least you're trying and you're doing whatever you can outside of that to find out what they might talk about, talking to the possible speakers and so on. But you're making it a nice experience for your client, not so much for the customers, because the way you serve the customer is how you prepare and then how you actually do your job at that moment. But before that, it's the client who is getting you the documents or getting you the contact point to get the documents, the contact point to get the equipment, whatever. Maybe you're the one who's the contact point for the equipment. Who knows? But you're making that whole time as comfortable for the person who pays you as possible. Okay? What a novel idea. Then you get to the T in the post-purchase experience, and that's when you're actually in the booth and working, or when you're actually standing next to the person, or doing your consecutive, or doing your negotiating, or whatever that you're doing, with the client, with the customer, paid for by the client. And then afterwards, you've got a little ways still on that post-purchase experience thing where you're billing them. And you're doing it in a responsible way, in a professional way that they understand. They pay you, they loved your service, they felt really reassured the entire time. They felt reassured. They felt like they were in good hands. They felt that you were safe hands for them and for their goal and for their contract. And then what happens? They become your advocate. That's down here. They become your advocate. They become free advertising for you. They'll talk about you to their friends, to their colleagues, to anybody who needs another interpreter, translator, whatever. They'll talk about you. They'll give you testimonials. They'll give you referrals and recommendations. And so that means that when they have another trigger, another international meeting that takes place, another whatever, they're not going to go through the initial consideration set, thinking, searching, Googling, evaluating stuff. They're going to jump straight from the trigger to calling you and to signing another contract with you. That's the loyalty loop. Okay. This is exactly how things work for me and my clients. Okay. There's a trigger. This also works for Know Your Worth. There's a trigger. Maybe you lost one too many clients because you weren't able to communicate your value, whatever. You start thinking, how am I going to do this better? You spot one of my ads. You might see my online presence, my website with my blog posts. You evaluate all of this. You think, how much money do I have? Oh, I can afford this class. Okay, I'll take the class. I sign that contract with Julia. I pay. In my case, it's upfront. Julia gives me a post-purchase experience that I'm really happy with. And what happens the next time that I, Julia, advertise my next class? You guys are liking, you're commenting, you're reposting, you're doing all sorts of wonderful things for which, thank you. I really appreciate that. And so the next time there's a trigger for you or whatever, maybe I come out with a new class, maybe you have another problem, boom, you're in that loyalty loop and you just say, yes, I'm going to buy that class from Julia. It's the exact same thing with interpreting. It's the exact same thing with translating. It's the exact same thing with whatever service you are providing. Okay? So that's what the client journey or the consumer decision journey is all about here for me. Okay. And now you can see why, again, that contract is absolutely not your end goal. It's the post-purchase experience that's your end goal. Okay. So that's pretty much what I wanted to say about the client journey. I'm going to take this slide off the stream now so that hopefully you got a screenshot. But if you look up the McKinsey Consumer Decision Journey, you'll find it online. It's not a problem. It's everywhere. And I'll put a link to the image in the comments below the LinkedIn Live after this is all over. I'm really looking forward to reading your comments afterwards. And in the meantime, what I'd like to let you know is that before the top tip today, because of course I always end on a top tip for you, before I get to it, I just wanted to let you know that the next live will be sometime in May, always on a Saturday at 4 p.m. CET. And next time I'll be together with an interpreter who also owns a boutique agency in the States. And what we will be talking about is what agencies expect of interpreters. And you'll hear some interesting stories, and you'll be a lot better prepared when you decide to contact an agency or talk to an agency at all about anything that you would find interesting. So now what I would like to just say, and I'm really glad, thank you so much, Roxanne, for your lovely comment. I'm glad it was informative, and I have a feeling it was pretty clear because there weren't any questions. So I'd like to just get to my top tip, which is be online consistently. Okay, figure out where you need to be online by talking to your favorite clients, by deciding what area you love to work in. Find out where those clients hang out online. Are they only on LinkedIn? Are they on some special place? Are they on Pinterest? Are they on somewhere else? Whatever, but be there and be there consistently. The reason I say consistently is because the more often that they hear you saying something like, Julia Poger is a business conference and diplomatic interpreter working with Russian, and then they see that on your LinkedIn profile, and they see that on your Twitter, and they see that on your Instagram They see that on your Telegram. They see that on your website. They hear you saying it. They hear other people saying it. They will start to trust you more because nobody's saying anything else. Everybody's always saying the same thing about you, even when most of the time it's you talking about you. And the consistency is what's going to make them trust you more. And the online part is what's going to help you out the most. And thank you very much, Margaret, for coming as well to the LinkedIn Live. So that is pretty much what I wanted to share today. And I hope that you'll be back with me in May when we are talking about what agencies expect from interpreters. I will make sure to put the YouTube Ask Me Anything playlist link into the comments below as well. Remember, if you want to rewatch this or watch it at all, you can either go to the LinkedIn post about this and watch it from there, or go to my YouTube channel. And that's pretty much it. Thank you so much for coming today. Thank you for thanking me in the comments. I'm sorry you didn't have any questions, but on the other hand, maybe that means that I was able to go through absolutely everything really well. And I'll see you next month with my guest, who will be talking about what agencies expect from interpreters. And it's really great to be back again. So have a great rest of your Saturday and see you next month.